Hey there! Did you know Baker's always gives you savings and rewards on top of our lower than low prices? And when you download the Baker's app, you'll enjoy over $500 in savings every week with digital coupons. And don't forget fuel points to help you save up to $1 per gallon at the pump. Want to save even more? With a Boost membership, you'll get double fuel points and free delivery. So shop and save big at Baker's today. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Savings may vary by state. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
Hi everyone, I'm Deb Flashenberg. Welcome to Yoga, Birth, Babies, a podcast produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. We will be diving into everything prenatal yoga, birth, and baby related, hoping to inspire, educate, and empower you through your journey into motherhood. Thank you for listening.
Hi, I'm Deb Flashenberg, and I'm your host of Yoga, Birth, Babies. And today we're going to talk about what is a doula and why would you want one? So full disclosure, I was a labor support doula for over 10 years, so maybe I'm a little biased about the support a doula can offer. So in this conversation, I am talking to Jeanna McNeil. Let me tell you a little bit about her. She is a birth doula, a birth photographer, and a maternal mental health advocate. Her passion is serving women and families locally in Alabama and virtually all over the world, helping parents to feel confident and empowered as they navigate every season of their parenthood journey. So Jeanna and I talk about a lot. First of all, we're going to go over what is a doula, how they play a role in birth, how they're not there to take the place of a partner, but to enhance what a partner can offer. And we're going to talk about how a doula is for every family, every type of birth, not just the unmedicated birth. So don't think that you have to have one type of birth in mind to get the benefits of a doula. And then, of course, because Jean and I both are geeks for data and studies, we go into some of the benefits of having a doula with some hard facts behind it. Because again, who doesn't love a little bit of hard facts to make you feel confident about your choices? So it's quite a wonderfully filled conversation. I had a blast getting to know Jeanna. She and I are very much on the same wavelength, and I think you're going to learn a lot. And then one bonus of this conversation is, say you listen to this and you're thinking, yeah, a doula is right for me. Well, we go over questions that you may want to use when you're interviewing a doula. So again, I think you can get so much out of this jam-packed conversation. Before we get to that, I always like to give you a heads up about what's happening at PYC. So we have plowed through the holidays. We are well into 2024. Bonkers even saying that. I remember, I'm dating myself a little bit, but I remember the big turn of the whole Y2K. And here we are, 2024. And things are going really well. We still have our classes online 7 days a week, in-studio classes 6 days a week. We have a full on-demand library because I know my schedule is not your schedule necessarily. And we still have a full in-studio schedule of workshops from everything from childbirth ed to lactation to infant safety CPR, comforting touch, the whole gamut to help support you through pregnancy and postpartum. And of course, we've got our teacher training. So we do it online 3 times a year in New York City, once a year. And we have coming up this spring, our once a year postnatal teacher training. So lots of opportunities to study. All right, we're going to take a super quick break. And when we come back, please enjoy my conversation with Jeanna.
Hey there! Did you know Baker's always gives you savings and rewards on top of our lower than low prices? And when you download the Baker's app, you'll enjoy over $500 in savings every week with digital coupons. And don't forget fuel points to help you save up to $1 per gallon at the pump. Want to save even more? With a Boost membership, you'll get double fuel points and free delivery. So shop and save big at Baker's today. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Savings may vary by state. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
Hi, Jeanna. How are you?
Hey, Deb. I'm good. So good to talk to you today.
I am really excited. As we were talking before I pressed record, we have both been in the birth work, doula work for a while, and I'm so excited to pick your brain because I'm going to play a little fangirl. I've been watching you on Instagram for a while, and I'm like, she knows her stuff. I like her. So that is why I reached out to you, especially when I had some students saying, let's have another podcast about doulas, because it's been actually a while. And so I'm just excited to dive in because one of my students literally said to me, why should someone have a doula? And I'm like, oh, we need to do a podcast on that. So
Yeah. Well, I am so thankful and honored that you would choose me to hang out and talk with you. So yeah,
Yay. All right. So
interested to know
let's
what your questions are.
all right. So let's jump in with I'd love to learn a little bit about you and what led you to doula work.
Well, I actually was a graphic designer for about 13 years. But when I got pregnant with my first child, I was interested in having an unmedicated birth. I think, at the time I was like, I don't even know. But I didn't do any kind of prep for it. And by just sheer luck, honestly, this woman came into my life and was like, hey, I heard you're interested in giving birth unmedicated. And I just want to be the voice that tells you that you can do it because I'm sure you get a lot of like negative, feedback about that. But I want to be honest with you. You're probably not going to get there doing what you're doing, which is nothing. And so she was like, I've, birthed 3 times, 3 different ways. And if you're interested in just having a conversation, I'd love to like share some things with you that I learned that may help you get closer to your goals. And so my first response was like, I don't know you. I don't want to do that. But like that was in my head. And so when I sent her a message back, I was like, I would love to do that. And so I sat with her and she told me about her different birth experiences and just gave me so much encouragement. And where I was starting to kind of be afraid and dread birthing my child, after speaking with her, I felt so much lighter and really encouraged. And I was like, oh, this can be something I can enjoy. Like, that sounds great. And so then, of course, I was like, well, you have to be at my birth. And so my husband was like, who's this lady that is just coming into this space? And I was like, she has to be here. So she acted as my doula for my first birth. And I did have a really beautiful and empowering birth experience. And then she got pregnant and was like, can you help support me in the same way I supported you? And I was like, absolutely not. And that is not my.
I thought you were going to say, absolutely, I will. I did not expect you to be like, absolutely not.
Actually, all throughout college, all of my friends who are in nursing school, I'm like, ew, y'all are going to have to work with body fluids all the time. But anyway, so I finally agreed to do that, but I was like, I want to take a training to actually be able to help you. And so I signed up for doula training, not realizing I was about 2 weeks pregnant.
Oh, wow.
And so by the time training rolled around, I was about 12 and a half weeks pregnant. And when my doula birthed, I was about 20 weeks. And it was really tough. Like, that was not the one to do the intro, when you're pregnant, I feel like, for me. But it was very like eye-opening and just like the support need that is there in any kind of birthing environment, just for families to feel supported, to help advocate, that really stuck with me. And so I did have my little boy. My doula was present, even though her baby was only 5 months old. And I was kind of like, I might do this every now and then, but for the most part, I'm going to stick with my job. But opportunities just kept presenting themselves. People would hear about maybe births that I had attended or, supported, and were like, can I please just hire you to do this? And I'm a faith-based person. And I truly felt like that was what the Lord was calling me to do. And I was like, no, thank you. Twice, actually. And, it just kind of got to the point where, again, those opportunities were coming. And so I was taking more of those. And then into 2021, I went into birth work full time. And my business really changed from that point on and grew exponentially. And so that's how I landed here working with body fluids after, all those years. And I love it. I truly can't believe that I would have ever said no to this, because it is the greatest honor to be chosen by a family in that sacred space to help welcome their little miracle. Like, it's just, I cannot imagine a job better than what I have.
It is pretty amazing. Granted, I haven't done a birth, although when you're talking about being 20 weeks pregnant at birth, for when I was pregnant with both my kids, I was still attending births. It is hard. And so I just commend you for going through that first one and not being like, and I am done with this. Like, it must have really spoken to you. And there is something special every birth. And I've done, I think I was a little over 100 births when I stopped. I still got teary at every birth. It was not just the birth of the baby. It was taking in the moment of seeing that baby born, but then seeing the parents, or sometimes it was a single parent, just respond to what they did, no matter how it unfolded. It was just, and then watching the baby and the parent come together, it still just kind of opens my heart with just complete warmth. I know that sounds so cheesy, but
No, you're
there is
right.
something to witness. It's just, it's an honor. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I wasn't expecting to go there, but like I said,
Oh, yeah. I mean, no two are the same. It's like it's this beautiful, unique experience every time. And
yeah,
like, to speak to what you said about being present to see a baby born is so amazing. And I have found myself, and this was true early on, I'm always looking at the mom like every time and like what she is feeling, what she is experiencing. And like that is what I love being able to also reflect with them on that
yeah,
postnatally. And I really feel like the way in which we birth and how we're supported are the things that stick with us,
absolutely.
throughout our parenting journey. And so I think that's part of why having a doula can be so important, is to, start that parenthood experience like that.
Feeling supported from the beginning is so important. So I guess we've been talking about doulas a bit, but before we go into why someone would choose a doula, let's start to describe what a doula is and the role they play in birth. Because I'm sure there are a few people listening. They're like, you throw this doula word around, and I'm really not sure what that means.
Yeah. If I can tell you like a funny story. So
Sure.
my sister took me to this performance called Symphony of Dance a couple of weeks ago, and she got to meet Derek Huff
Hmm.
from Dancing with Stars and his wife. And so because I got to be a tag along, we got to do a meet and greet. And she was like, ask a question, ask a question. And so I was like, okay, if you guys start a family, will you have a doula? And I heard this lady behind me go, a what? And I'm like, yes, we still don't know what a doula is. And that is normal and a question we get a lot. So I usually like to tell people that a doula is just an unbiased, non-medical professional that can be hired to give informational, emotional, and physical support before, during, and after birth. And really, I kind of liken it to hiring a guide for whitewater rafting. Every ride is going to be different. And while there are going to be some people who can completely do it on their own, most of us would love to have a guide who they may not know exactly every detail of what's coming up, but they have the skill to help navigate so that we can enjoy the ride. So that's kind of how I like to help people understand what my role is in their support circle.
I absolutely love that. I actually just went whitewater rafting a few weeks ago when I was in Costa Rica, and
Oh.
my guide was the best because I almost flew out of the raft, and he literally, I felt a hand push me down. And then every time we're starting to hit some like grade 4, grade 5 rapids again, this was my first time. He's like, get down the boat. It's like, he's like, I felt so taken care of. He was like, you're right. It's like a doula. They're looking out. They know the twists and turns. They know how to support. So I just had a big smile on my face when you're talking about that. All right. So we're talking about why someone would want a doula. So how would you respond when someone says they're concerned that their doula will push their partner out of the experience? Because that's something else that the students will say to me. They're like, but I want my husband or my partner involved. Isn't the doula going to, you know, overtake things?
So that is a question that I get pretty frequently. Either partners are wondering if I may take their place. I've even had people's parents or other family members, wonder if I'm going to kind of be in the way of them being able to experience, the birth as well. And so, what I like to communicate to families who have that question is that I'm just a team member. And one of my greatest desires is to work with the whole family to help them prepare to welcome their baby together. I'm just in a support role. And my hope is to facilitate confidence throughout the whole family unit and invite them in where I feel they may be able to contribute. So, that may look like, if the mom is laboring and needs counter pressure and I recognize that, I may start doing it and then invite her partner or her mother or sister, whoever's there, to come tag in on that. And then me step away and just continue to hold space so that they're welcoming the baby together.
I like that. What also about the thought where I've had people say, well, can't my partner just be my doula?
Yeah, and that's another one I feel like I've even had people say, oh, well, I don't really need a doula because my mom is there or, my partner or whatever. And I will say, I want to like speak to that in a positive light, because in 2020, when I wasn't able to go into my local hospitals, I did have to teach these people how to do my job. And I know that was a lot on their shoulders. And I even communicated that, like, listen, this is a heavy assignment, but you can do this. But also what I found in doing that is that those family members didn't quite get to enjoy birth as much as times like before that. And so that's kind of what I like to communicate to families as well, is that while they definitely do have a role where they can contribute greatly, my hope is that if I'm present, I'm helping you take that weight off of your shoulders
Mm-hmm.
so that you can enjoy every moment as much as possible, and know that you have somebody who does this all the time looking out for you.
I also found when I was doing the doula work that there's a different emotional involvement, because it can be really hard for family members to watch someone they love go through something very different than they see them on a day-to-day basis. And
Mhm.
for some, it can be a lot of big sensation, and that can actually be scary to family members. So
Yeah.
I found and of course, I care for my clients, but it's not the same as being emotionally involved. So I found that to be a real benefit of having a doula. And funny thing was, for my second birth, I was asking my husband, like, I know my midwife's going to have a midwifery assistant. Do you think we really need a doula? My husband's like, absolutely. We absolutely need a doula. He's like, I'm already on the phone with Terry. And I'm like, okay,
Oh,
okay. I gotcha.
yes. And I always love getting that feedback as well from other, family members that, I had one dad actually leave me a review one time, and he was like, I'll be honest with you, every appointment that I came to, I was like, what is this girl? Like, what are we doing? And what are these stretches she's telling us to do? And he said after the birth, he was like, you are worth your weight in gold. And I'm going to tell everybody they need a doula. So I think you're right. It's that realization of like, they can be a little more free to just be in that one specific role and, not feel the weight of navigating things they don't do on a regular basis. But basically, to speak to what you said, the emotional aspect, having someone who can be present and still provide, unbiased information, that calm presence. I think that's super important for that balance in the birth space.
Yeah. And they don't have a certain, partnerships have dynamics. Like I remember in my second birth, I was starting to get really angry that it was just hard. And my husband was trying so hard to massage me. He was actually choking me. And my doula just said, okay, we're getting off the ball. You're going into the shower. I'm like, no, I am certainly not. And she's like, yep, we are. And I think sometimes if it's an emotional partner, it could be hard
Mhm.
to kind of hold that. But I'm like, okay, this is what we're doing because she told me how to do it. But so I think there is the intimacy of a couple, and the
Yeah.
dynamics could also be, I don't want to say challenging, but it's different. Like a partnership is different than how the doula can sometimes navigate in a different way. And I'm going off on a little tangent, but I bet you can relate to that.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So how are doulas for every family and every type of birth, not just the unmedicated births?
Yeah, I love that question, because I feel like, the thought process, like when somebody hears about doula, if they do know what it is, it's like, oh, well, that's, for that type of family, quote unquote, and I always am like, what type do you mean? It's like, oh, families that birth at home, birth unmedicated, and that kind of thing. But what I like to, just help people understand is that doulas are at your service all throughout pregnancy, during your birth, and sometimes weeks postpartum, depending on how that doula contracts out clients, to help just answer questions, explore what options may be most desirable for you, and just help you feel as confident as possible in each of those seasons. So whether you're birthing unmedicated or medicated or vaginal or cesarean at home or the hospital, doulas help give those suggestions for breathing and movement and partner support, and they help advocate. So I feel like no matter how or where you birth, those support areas can be invaluable to your overall experience.
I 100% agree. And I absolutely agree that people sometimes think like doulas like hippie crunchy, only one way, but who couldn't use support? Like who couldn't use an extra set of hands and eyes and is a good heart there.
Yeah. And I like to tell people like doulas are like a birth buddy. So like if you are 6 months pregnant and it's 9 o'clock at night and your hip hurts and you can't get comfortable sleeping, you're not going to call like your OB or midwife most likely, but you might text your doula and be like, hey, I'm struggling with this. Do you have any ideas on what I could do?
Yeah.
And I might text you back, yeah, I feel like if you do this like stretch or two, maybe get you some magnesium oil when you can and rub that in that spot. If you experience it again, maybe you can rest a little better. So it's just, being that like go-to person that is there just simply to serve you.
Yeah, and a lot of doulas have a lot of information and different backgrounds. Like if you talk to your typical OB or midwife, be like, all right, so what positions should I be doing ahead of birth to help prep my pelvis and pelvic floor? I don't think many care providers can offer that feedback,
Right.
because even if it's a medicated birth, we still want things to be internally balanced because we know that's going to make birth smoother. And so
Yeah.
that's again another point where I think a doula can help with the preliminary work. Even if it's going to be medicated, even a cesarean, we still want things to be smooth so things can heal well.
Yes. Like you were speaking my language. When you say balance, I'm like, every doula is different and we all specialize in different things. I feel like body balance and movement is one of mine. And you're absolutely right about, I feel, especially for medicated birth and especially for cesarean birth, we need to help people understand that prepping your body ahead of time to undergo some of those things is not only going to help you have a better and hopefully more smooth birth experience, but a better
Absolutely.
recovery.
Yeah, I have some students that will be like, well, I'm going to have an epidural. Do I really need to do all this? I'm like, in fact, probably more, because
Yes.
we need to make sure that baby's well aligned, because if movement is more limited with an epidural, we don't want baby coming in, asynclitic. We don't want
Mhm.
the pelvic floor really tight. So yeah, as a prenatal yoga teacher, and I'm also a spinning babies educator, like this is the thing. And I know you feel the same way because I've
Yes.
read your stuff and watched it. It's the preliminary work that can make the actual birth much smoother. And most typical OB and midwives, that's just not their focus. They're focused, in a more medical scenario.
Yeah. And like to that effect as well, I've had clients be like, oh, well, my OB hasn't told me anything about that. And so I like to use that opportunity to say, hey, you've hired a, medical professional, whether it be an OB or midwife, to take care of your medical needs. But they're really not going to be really heavy on the childbirth education front. And that's what a doula is to help, fill in all of those gaps in the preparation sense.
Yes. Oh my gosh, we're speaking such a sin language. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to actually go into, because I love data and I love studies, we're going to actually talk about some data that supports the benefit of doulas. So people out there, they're like, well, it's all talk, but let's give some data. Okay, we'll be right back.
Hey there. Did you know Baker's always gives you savings and rewards on top of our lower than low prices? And when you download the Baker's app, you'll enjoy over $500 in savings every week with digital coupons. And don't forget fuel points to help you save up to $1 per gallon at the pump. Want to save even more? With a Boost membership, you'll get double fuel points and free delivery. So shop and save big at Baker's today. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Savings may vary by state. Restrictions apply. See site for details. Hey there. Did you know Baker's always gives you savings and rewards on top of our lower than low prices? And when you download the Baker's app, you'll enjoy over $500 in savings every week with digital coupons. And don't forget fuel points to help you save up to $1 per gallon at the pump. Want to save even more? With a Boost membership, you'll get double fuel points and free delivery. So shop and save big at Baker's today. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Savings may vary by state. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
Okay, so we are back. So, can you explain some of the findings of the studies that talk about having a doula can be beneficial for the pregnant person?
Yeah. First of all, I want to say I think you're my new best friend because you just talked about body balance and then you went straight into I love a study. So like
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, and that's, one of the things I like to, one of the initial resources I like to share with families is there's an evidence-based birth article on the benefit of doulas, and some of the things that it shares that, the study benefits are a great decrease in the risk of cesarean in the United States. I can't remember exactly what the percentage was last year, but it's in the 30s some odd percent. And so about 1 in every 3 births are going to result in a cesarean birth, but having a doula may decrease your personal risk of that. Increase in the likelihood of spontaneous vaginal birth. And also, this was not in the study, but something that I think is being studied, but also the rate of vaginal birth when inductions are, chosen or necessary. Decrease in the use of any medications for pain relief. Shorter labors, lower risk of 5-minute APGAR scores for baby. And also just a large decrease in the risk of being dissatisfied with the birth experience in general. And I find that to be personally true, no matter, again, where or how a birth happens, or even, I'll be honest, like there have been some where the scenarios surrounding birth were really tough. But at the end of the day, families are able to communicate, that was a hard ride, but I feel really good about it because I was able to make the decisions that I felt were best for me. And I felt confident in navigating those things. So
yeah, I really think that final point also is just so important, the satisfaction. I remember doing a podcast with Penny Simkin years ago. I was, by the way, because I know as a doula, you probably love her too.
yeah.
I was like, I was like fangirling on her. I'm like, oh my God, I'm talking to Penny Simkin. But she really talked about the difference between pain and suffering and the role a doula can make. She's like, somebody could be in pain, but they're not suffering depending on how they're being treated, how they're being supported, how they're being listened to. And she said, and somebody could be suffering even if they're not in a great amount of pain because they're feeling unheard and dismissed. And I think you really exemplified that with the idea about the satisfaction that, births don't always go as planned. I say, actually, most of them don't. But
Right.
when you have someone advocating and seeing you and supporting you, that can make the difference between a traumatic experience or just turning a corner in a different way you weren't than expecting.
Yeah. And I think, just culturally, there's so much fear surrounding birth.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
we've been given this narrative that birth is horrible and it's painful and it's something you've just got to get over so that you can get a baby. But what I have learned, not only through my own birth experiences, which, by the way, I do not like being uncomfortable. I don't even want to sweat my clothes. But because of the information and the support that I was given, I was able to have unmedicated births. And I was like, this is amazing, but I feel like it's because of that support and because I had somebody speaking that life into me. And I just feel like that's, one of the greatest facets of being able to educate moms and just and families in general and the general public, through Instagram when we try, is to help people understand that birth is not something you just have to get through, power through. It's something that you can experience, and it will change you dramatically in the most beautiful and transformative ways. And yes, some of those experiences are going to be really, really tough. And there's going to be things you have to navigate that you just did not see coming, like in that whitewater raft and a branch comes near your face and you have to duck. Like there's going to be some things that, are going to push you to your boundaries. But when you step past those boundaries, there is nothing like that feeling of just going past what you thought was possible for yourself.
Oh, I absolutely love that. All right. So you talked a little bit about some of the stuff about before that the doula client can reach out to you if you had questions, but let's talk a little bit more of the whole picture of a doula. So if someone's starting to think like, oh yes, I need that advocate, but it's so much more than just the birth experience. So can you lay out what someone may expect? I know all doulas function a little differently, but what typically happens before the birth and kind of what to expect about when a doula shows up on the scene, what they offer during, and then really the after part as well.
Yeah. Typically what I like to tell clients is I intend to be present for every piece of your journey, but I'm going to help prepare you so that you are so confident that if none of us show up, you're still going to feel really good about it. But in that, I do like to meet several times prenatally, as many doulas do. And I feel like that's what makes having a doula work, is getting to know that person one-on-one and building this rapport so that in those very intimate and vulnerable moments, you have a person you can look in the eyes that you've met with several times and feel comfortable with, and be able to communicate freely with them and trust, the information that they're giving you. So meeting a couple of times prenatally, and that looks like getting to know each other, doing some childbirth education, and really just staying in touch all throughout the pregnancy journey. So by phone and by email, that's the best way, in my opinion, to just keep those lines of communication open and understand what's going on in a family's, in a family's life and a mother's pregnancy, so that you can, for me as a doula, can uniquely support them on the birthday, because everybody's going to be different,
Yeah.
And then just help families explore what their birth options are. Because I feel like even with the best childbirth education classes, there can still be so many questions left. Like, okay, well, that was great general information, but I still don't know the intricacies, into all of the options that were just presented. And so doulas help walk through all of those so that ahead of time, you can kind of think about what those options may be and how you may want to navigate those. Also, how to advocate for those things or navigate deviations from that. So that and we have to say when, because something in birth is going to come up that you didn't expect. When something like that happens, it doesn't take you off track and put you in that fear mode. It's that moment of accepting, like, okay, here's the thing, and here are the ways that I can navigate this. And then, of course, just be available to help answer, again, like those random questions of like, oh, my hip hurts, or what is this when I wiped, that you may not send to your OB or midwife. Just navigating general information and maybe understanding what to expect in each, stage of motherhood. So, during pregnancy and during birth and postpartum, as anything comes up, again, you just have that go-to person to stay in touch with and get some answers for your questions. And then I feel like doulas are really great about helping families communicate with their providers, so that they can build a relationship with them as well and understand more about their own health and what choices may be best for them. And then help make suggestions for unique resources like PT, chiropractic care, counseling, yoga, like any of these things that could be unique to this one person's journey and help them have a better experience. It's really cool to be able to help them discover those things.
When do you typically head over? So say you've been on call. I was always on call at 37 weeks. I know some people do 38 weeks. And then I would have my clients, I wouldn't head over at like the first contraction. We usually had a conversation on the phone, checking in. Although in the very beginning, sometimes like when it's a first doula, like very beginning, I'm like, I'm here too early. So I used to just check in all the time. Sometimes, especially being in New York City, we could be blocks away. So sometimes I'd pop over and leave, and then really determine when it's time to hunker down. What's your way of doing it?
Yeah. So usually I'll tell families to stay in touch with me pretty closely, starting around 36 weeks or sooner if they're having any kind of, labor-like activity. Hopefully not at that point, but it happens. But somewhere around 36 weeks, I just ask, families to keep in touch and just let me know, like, hey, are you experiencing, elevated Braxton Hicks or any new feelings in your body, losing your mucus plug, things like that could be indicative of, labor at some point. I do go on call at 38 weeks, and you're right, everybody's different. Around here in Alabama, in case you can't tell from my accent, a lot of doulas go on call at 39 weeks. I'll be honest, that makes me
39.
Really nervous. It makes me really nervous.
Really? But
yes.
okay.
I'm
Interesting.
like, y'all. And so, yeah, I do 38 weeks, unless it's like a repeat client or somebody who's like having their fourth, fifth, I'll go and call it 37 weeks. But as I encourage clients to, because we're staying in close communication at 36 weeks, I can have a better understanding of what's going on so that when they call and say, and I require a call, not a text, but like I ask them to call me and just let me know what's going on. And if it sounds like they could be kind of in that space of impending labor, or maybe they're even in early labor, I'll give some suggestions there, like, try to stretch and rest and eat and just, don't do a whole lot of anything. And I think that's one thing where a lot of moms try to get things going, quote unquote, because they get so excited. I'm like, this is not the time. This is where we put gas in the tank. And so we stay in close contact throughout early labor. And as things begin to change, like when contractions are starting to really get your attention and you're having to stop what you're doing, I would love another update at that point so that I can kind of understand, how your labor is trending. And then I typically come on the scene right around like active labor. So when contractions have gotten pretty consistently in a pattern, and you're definitely starting to have to work through contractions, like that's when I like to arrive. Just because I feel like sometimes when I have been there a little early, it's almost like a distraction, and can actually make labor space back out. And so that's kind of like the sweet spot I try to hit. Now, there are times where if somebody has been in early labor for quite a long time, or they're in that prodromal labor, that start-stop for days, I might offer to come over to their house and just help stretch them out. What I have found recently is that doing a fear release with someone is just as valuable as anything else. Just helping them process what they're feeling, any kind of emotions they're dealing with, and just like seeing them work through that and like submit to that and be free from that. Like sometimes that's the thing to help them get into labor.
Yes.
And, I'll get out of their way. And again, just when things pick back up, come back. And then I stay through the duration of birth. Sometimes that might be an hour, and sometimes that might be 26 hours. But I try to stay on as long as I can, though I do have a backup clause that if I've been with you in person for more than 12 hours, I reserve the right to call a backup. And I have really, especially in the last several months, really leaned on backup support. I have in the past for those super long births. I've understood that, the best way I can support a family is to give them the best support possible. And if I'm not it, that's okay. But especially, like I said, in the last couple of months, I have given births completely over to backup doulas sometimes. And that's not always ideal for the families. That can be a little scary to have a backup come in, but I always ensure them that I'm going to choose somebody who is similar in personality to me, that has, similar experience and background that I do, so that it would be a seamless, entry into their space.
Can I ask a question about the backups again? I know all doulas work differently. I would, again, I'm a little type A, so don't judge me too much. But when I would meet with my clients, and I only took my doula my yoga students, so I got to know them on a 2-3 times a week basis. I would do my meetings and I would type up the notes and I would send them to the client for approval, and then I would send my notes to the backup doula. Do you know, is that common? Is that something that you do too, in case your backup has to step in?
So I do something similar. And when you say type A, girl, you're like speaking my language. Like, you have no judgment here. I actually always say it's so funny to me that this was my calling, to come into a place where you never know when you're going to go to work or how long you're going to be there. But yeah, like I keep notes all throughout pregnancy. So every time I meet with a client, I'll take paper notes because I don't like to type on a computer while I'm talking to somebody. But I keep a really long list of any kind of details and notes and things like that. And I always tell my clients that's what I'm doing, is just keeping them for me, but also in case I ever needed to communicate those, to another support person. But in the event that a backup is needed, most of the time I've had enough time to say, hey, by phone, call them and give them the most information that I can as possible, and also send those notes and say, if you have, any questions about these notes, call me back. But I feel like they're usually thorough enough to like explain what a person's personality type might be like, some strict, like by what the client has told me, what they feel like their strengths and weaknesses are, and where they might want help and not want help, and what their preferences are. And I feel like has been a really good way to communicate those quickly for those times we don't have a ton of time.
Yeah, I love that you take notes throughout everything that you do with them. If I was still doing birth work, I would totally be like, yes, I'm going to take that. So this is good for the doulas out there that maybe are new to learn some habits that I think are really smart. All right, so let's jump forward. So baby's been born. You've done an amazing job supporting. Everyone's happy. Where do we go from there?
Yeah. I mean, typically when I'm leaving the birth space, whether it's home or hospital, I'll remind the mom first. I'll be like, hey, this is not the time to learn new information, but I do want to be the reminder that I am still here for you. I'm not going to bombard you with messages, but I will check in with no expectation for you to respond until you're ready. And then I look to the partner, mom, sister, whoever is there, to give them that reminder as well. Because prenatally, I share a postpartum support plan that we try to fill out together to talk about some of those needs that may arise postpartum. And in that meeting, I remind them, that I'll be on contract for 6 weeks typically. I mean, everybody's different. Postpartum is really important to me. So I just try to give them that reminder that somebody is there and available, because, once you go home or you're at home when you birth, for the first couple of days, you're just trying to like get back mentally. I mean, I don't even know how to describe it. You're just kind of in this like post-birth different realm, like what is time at that point? And so once you come out of that, after, start to come out of that for a couple of days, you may have lots and lots and lots of questions and feel really overwhelmed. Mm-hmm. And so a doula is still there to be that buffer and to give information and emotional support, physical support when needed. But yeah, it's not always typical. I don't know what it's been like in your area or maybe what you did, but here, a lot of doulas will contract out 2 weeks postpartum. But to be just honest and vulnerable, I had beautiful birth experiences, but my postpartums were a dumpster fire. And I found that somewhere around week 3 or 4, I started feeling really lonely and just overwhelmed and, didn't know how to communicate what my emotions and what my needs were. And so I felt like that was a need to just continue to be available for somebody. And I always tell people 6 weeks, but I mean, it's going to be 3 months later. I'm going to be like, how are you doing? Just thinking about you, because postpartum is forever, yes. But you recover for well over 6 weeks. It's months and months and months and months.
Yeah, I would do like a 2-week check-in when they were ready, like go to the house and hang out. And then I would do just like random check-ins. But then I also, because they were students, they would usually come back around 6 weeks. So then I would also see them. And because of that, we also had correspondence of, resources and just little check-ins. As I'm realizing more and more, it was very special to have. And I made a decision early on just to work with my students after having a bad experience of working with someone who I hadn't known as well. It was really, we got to know each other, and I found it to be just such a special way to support people. But it sounds like the way that you do it just is really embodying everything. Like you're just so present for them. And again, I'm hoping that doulas that are newer to this path take what you're saying about realizing there is a pretty big drop of hormones around that 10 to 14, a little beyond. And that's where the overwhelm, like you explained, and thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that you had that experience. And I think that can help people learn where there can be a need.
Yeah. And I think I'm still learning too on the post. So I actually did postpartum doula work. And then I realized pretty quickly that you can't do both birth doula work and then be simply a postpartum doula, because you can't cancel on those postpartum moms who are counting on you to be there when you have to be at birth. But I do still feel like, even though clients understand that they've paid for the service for 6 more weeks after their baby is born, and I do offer to come, to their home and sit with them and just, be available, a lot of families don't take advantage of that. And I don't know if it's because they are kind of in that overwhelm and they just don't want somebody in their space, or, I don't know. I'm trying to figure out how to, help, still continue to help at somebody's comfort level. But I do feel like there's a little disconnect there sometimes.
Yeah. My midwife had something that worked really well for, I think, like it's maybe 6 to 8 weeks. So for the first 2 weeks, we did a phone call or a text, like every day. And
Okay.
then it would be, she would just text me and I think it was a phone call, just like, want to hear my voice, all is good. And then after that, it was just a text, I think like every other day, just check it in. Do you need anything? And so I felt really comfortable knowing that I had someone kind of having my back. And then we had our 6-week checkup, like the actual one where,
Yeah.
she made sure, everything was fine. But there was some comfort, because even though I adore my doula and she was my mentor, we didn't have that kind of continuous care after about 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So I like what you're saying.
And
All right.
like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm sorry.
No,
I was
keep
going to
going.
say, like, what, did you birth at home?
I did. So
Oh, yeah.
that is, I will say, it is a little unique. Having a home birth midwife. And it's funny, I just did a podcast recording with a midwife who does home birth and hospital births.
Mhm.
And she was talking a bit about the protocols for home birth midwives and hospital midwives, and they're very different.
Yeah.
All right. So someone might be listening to this and now they're super excited to have a doula. Where should they start when they think that they want to hire a doula? What kind of questions might they talk to their doula about to make sure they're a good match?
Yeah. I mean, I love to tell people, if you're able to connect with local doulas by, just a simple Google search, and you're able to find some that way, look at their website, see if they have a frequently asked questions page. That can be a good way to get some insights and start, trying to decide if this is a person you might want to talk to or not. Google search is not always the best, though, to be completely honest. There are some other resources like doulamatch.com, or maybe it's doulamatch.net, I can't remember, that you can find doulas that way. But once you do, I recommend actually interviewing a couple of doulas, unless you just find one that you were just like, I know it's this person, like this is the one. But interview a few and ask questions, kind of like some of the questions we've been talking about, just, how long have you been a doula and how did you come into this work? What trainings have you completed? How many births have you attended? One I love to get is like, what is your birth philosophy? So that helps you understand a little bit how they see birth and if that kind of aligns with how you feel about it. Do you support every type of birth? That's really important. Because not every doula does, and that's okay. Some specialize in one area or the other, and then some do all of them. Let's see, how and when are payments made? I think that's a really important one to understand the financial investment. And it is very much an investment. Again, everybody's very different. You'll see a wide range of prices, but I always like to tell people, like, it can be sticker shock sometimes, but also doulas often offer payment plans, and some of us offer discounts for certain things. Like right now, because in the great state of Alabama, our birthing options are being taken from us one at a time. I give a discount for people birthing at home because they're now incurring a little more cost than they would have. So it's always okay to ask those questions too. And then how many clients do you take per month? Sometimes that's going to really matter to a person, whether they're one of 5 or one of 2. Do you like working with OBs and midwives? What's the likelihood of you being at my birth? I feel like that's one of the biggest ones is like, okay, if I hire you and I invest in this, are you going to come? And that's a good place to have that conversation of, that backup support as well. Because the reality is again, like most of us, all of us are going to want to try to be at the birth. But if heaven forbid, like I get the flu or my kid's sick, I'm not going to bring that, into your space. And so just helping them understand that they will be supported, I think is really important.
I have one that I want to add, because that it meant so much to me. So I had, when I was a doula, and even as a childbirth educator, I have a mentor, Terry Richmond. She's done many podcasts with me. She was my doula for both my kids. Full disclosure, I adore her. But when I first started out, even though I did my doula training and, I knew a fair amount, I'd been doing prenatal yoga, I was already a Lamaze teacher. I still felt like, what do I know? I'm jumping into this. And so I had several births that I remember my very first posterior birth. I'm like, what is going on? I was able to reach out to her and be like, this is what I'm seeing. I am so confused by this labor pattern. I need some help. And so she was able to mentor me on the spot, and then I could bring that in. So that was helpful as I was a newer doula. And then as I continued and felt, I had a fair amount under my belt, she and I would still, after births, discuss the births. And, hindsight's the best. Be like, oh, this is what I saw. What do you think? And it was just so helpful. Even when I did over 100 births, I still had that opportunity to dissect it with her. And she's done well over 1,000. So I think asking, especially for a newer doula, asking them, do they have a mentor or someone they can touch base with when things are just, a little off the norm? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's a great one. I love that. I will say too, something that I get a lot of the time is, are you a certified doula?
Oh,
And it depends on who you ask, what weight is put on that. I personally did choose to certify with 2 entities and of course, just continue education with some other trainings. But even as a certified doula, I would just love to encourage families to talk to any doula because at some point I was not certified. I was having to work towards certification, and I don't feel any different now that I have a piece of paper.
yeah.
I think there's lots of very wonderful, knowledgeable, very gifted doulas who choose not to certify. So I'll usually just tell people just consider that may not be, a definitive for you.
That's a good one. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, what is one final tip or piece of advice you'd like to offer new and expectant parents? We'll be right back.
Hey there! Did you know Baker's always gives you savings and rewards on top of our lower than low prices? And when you download the Baker's app, you'll enjoy over $500 in savings every week with digital coupons. And don't forget fuel points to help you save up to $1 per gallon at the pump. Want to save even more? With a Boost membership, you'll get double fuel points and free delivery. So shop and save big at Baker's today. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Savings may vary by state. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
So we're back. So I'm so curious how you're going to answer this, because you are a mom of 2, so you've been through this, but you're also a doula of many years. So which hat are you going to put on? What is a final tip or piece of advice you'd like to offer?
I think just overall, what I would love to tell just any family is to think about birth as the first event that you do together as a family.
Oh, I love that.
Again, birth is not just something to simply be endured. It can be a really beautiful and empowering experience, no matter how or where you birth. And you definitely won't always remember all those details, but you'll remember how you felt and how you were treated, and you'll just carry that into parenthood. And so it's a really big deal. The way that you birth matters, and investing in that experience is invaluable.
Oh, I really like that. Where can people find your work?
Really, the easiest way to connect with me is through my website. I'm old school. I love, email. There you can find things like information on in-person and virtual support options, some frequently asked questions. You can see my Instagram and blog posts there, some photography examples, and then sometimes just things I recommend just for every, sorry.
Okay.
I literally looked out the window at a bird. That's what happened.
right, pick that up here. I'll pick it up from, also say the name of your website. So I'm going to start that one again. Okay, give me 1 second. Where can people find your work?
The easiest way to connect with me is through my website. There you can find things like information on in-person and virtual doula support options, frequently asked questions, Instagram and blog posts, photography examples, and things that I just recommend for different stages of motherhood. And I'll be honest, you can send me a message on Instagram, but I'm old school, so I'm going to probably check my emails first.
All right, and what is the name of your website?
It's by design, doulaservices.com.
And I'm going to say for the listeners, go ahead and check out Jeanna's reels. They're great. I have been inspired by many of your reels on Instagram. You just, when you said you were a graphic designer, I'm like, that makes sense.
Well, I often wonder if, because I actually went to college to be an interior designer, and my parents helped pay for my college, and now I play on the internet all day. So I kind of wonder. My mom tells me she's proud all the time. So,
well, you do excellent, excellent work. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this. I've had such a good time chatting with you.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me.
This has been an episode of Yoga, Birth, Babies, produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. You can catch us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Periscope. I'm Deb Flaschenberg. Thanks for listening.
Hey there! Did you know Baker's always gives you savings and rewards on top of our lower than low prices? And when you download the Baker's app, you'll enjoy over $500 in savings every week with digital coupons. And don't forget fuel points to help you save up to $1 per gallon at the pump. Want to save even more? With a Boost membership, you'll get double fuel points and free delivery. So shop and save big at Baker's today. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Savings may vary by state. Restrictions apply. See site for details.